If you have a terrible economy and need a way to control how 1 billion people spend their money, what better way than to render physical bills useless and digitize the entire economy behind zeros and ones? Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang. Today I'll explain why China is digitizing its economy. Well, there are two fundamental reasons: political control and economic control. But it's more comprehensive than just two words. But not only has China realized that the entire concept of Big Brother watching you, it's also on a path to basically turn everything in its economy digital. And of course, this includes digital yuan or digital RMB and facial and different forms of verification. Now, the goal is to force its citizens to spend money the way that the CCP wants them to. So let's first talk about the economic control of digitizing the economy. Now, digital economy means that everything is done online: e-commerce, investments, stock market, trade, all of these things are done through the digital medium. And it means that the state controls basically on an individual level how much you can spend, how much you must spend, how much you have, and where to spend it. It also knows what you spend it on. Digitizing the economy means removing physical money. At least that's what the CCP wants to do. For most people, and that's their cash, everything will be digital. On Monday, China's Premier Li Qiang says China is developing core industries in the digital economy to drive the country's economic rebound. Think about it. Sure, you can buy gold, right? Or you can buy cryptocurrency right now. But if the state demands that all merchants only accept digital yuan, you're not going to be able to spend any of that amount, right? You're not going to pay in gold nuggets or cryptocurrency. They're simply not going to be accepted. Now, this system will essentially shield China as an isolated entity where all of its people have to use this digital version of the currency everywhere they go in China. What is that going to look like for the rest of the world? Well, right now, China doesn't care that much. There's so many systems that already coexist to aid the 1984 model, right? You have social credit system, which is to keep you from using public transit or take out a loan if your credit goes low. You have the facial verification, ID verification systems, which again is used to verify that you are the person paying. You have digital RMB, which is in the making. And now there's a new system specifically targeting rich people in China. This is Alibaba China Operations former CFO. He recently made a video saying that a system that's been in development since at least 2017 is finally coming out. It's called Touching Bottom. Now, after being listed by this system, they will know what your assets, like cars and houses are, what your income sources are like, and anything finance related. Now, the official name is called Personal Finance and Asset Management System, and it's under the disguise that it's a tax reform program which will monitor everybody's income taxes and assets. But it only targets the wealthy upper middle class and the upper class individuals. Because to get you on this list, you need to make at least 270,000 US dollars or more. And if you are making about 870,000 US dollars or more, then you will be closely watched. In other words, this new system is targeting the wealth of the upper class in China. But of course, this doesn't apply to the vast majority of the Chinese population. Take a look at this video. She is in China trying to purchase items, but it requires facial recognition verification, which she fails, not allowing her to spend money. But none of these systems are direct enough to control how people spend money. What I'm trying to say here is that in order to achieve what was discussed in the 1984 book, you need a more comprehensive system, right? One that is so comprehensive that it covers everything. And that's where the digital yuan comes in. Now, it's going to be the most comprehensive yet because everybody has cash, everybody has bank accounts, everybody saves money, but they're going to require everyone to turn that, supposedly a 1-to-1 ratio, to the digital version. Currently, that system is being spot tested in 23 plus cities in China. Now, some rumors state that it could be launching later this year. However, we have no real information on this to confirm that is the case. Now, some background context on all of this. Right now, China's economy is in the worst state ever since, in 40 years. And it's also facing a lack of consumer confidence. In other words, nobody wants to buy because they don't trust the government. So China wants to force its citizens to spend money. Now, as you know, there's upper, middle class, and lower class. Now, China's three-class divides are very different than the rest of the world. Following the 1980s reform era, there was largely a missing middle class population because people either got rich or they stayed really poor. And I would say that China actually has a hidden fourth class, right? The communist officials, through embezzlement, corruption, they're the richest class of people in China. Now, their hidden wealth accumulation is unimaginable. Over the years, though, the middle class in China started to form. However, wealth disparity, it's huge. A report from Caixin shows in 2019, 43% of the Chinese population, that's 600 million people living with 1,000 RMB a month. You know how much that is in US dollars? That's about 140 US dollars. Can you imagine living on 140 to 200 US dollars a month? Compared to the US, 2021 data shows the share of the population in the middle class continues to hover around 50%. But regardless of the wealth distribution, in times like today, China is targeting all different classes. What this means is that in each class, right, the lower class, the sort of existing middle class, and the upper class in China have all been catered a particular system to control their money. For a while, the lower class simply had no access to real wealth in China. They're farmers, right? They're migrant workers, low-skilled tradesmen. They work long hours, but they receive very little pay. They often have to travel to different cities. Now, this population is already struggling by itself. In fact, the system is the state itself that's robbing them clean of their finances. And then the middle class has largely been dealing with the flow of the country, which, again, in recent years has turned out really, really bad. Right? You have people looking for jobs, young graduates with college degrees unable to find jobs. But neither of these two classes, they're really holding on to that wealth, that what I was talking about, the high amounts of accumulation, at least enough for the state for it matters, right? They're more known as human resources, or they call themselves human minerals, as they're seen as expendable and used and disposed of by the regime. What really, though, the state is looking for are the people that makes the big dollars, 6 figures, 7 figures, or more, and people that are heads of companies, private enterprises, executives, and so on, right? Think Jack Ma. Now, if the CCP, you got to remember, they're like a real thug situation, right? They love to rob people. They love to take people's money, take their finances, because that's how they are. They're thuggish. It's a thuggish organization, and that's the nature of it. If you think about it that way, it makes sense why they want to control people's money. Because you got to know how much they have before you go and rob them or take their house, right? Now, if the CCP wants that real amount of money to support its dying economy, it seems to make sense this is the time to do it, right? And so what happens, though, if we have a system that essentially covers all of that, or can eliminate all the accumulation of wealth in China over the 40 years in just one go? So that's why I think that digital yuan system may actually be the answer from the CCP. Of course, it's issued by the Central Bank of China. It's a central bank digital currency, or cbdc. But get this, imagine if the system is mandated nationwide. You take your 100,000 yuan to the bank. It says that you got converted to 100K to become digital yuan. And they say that you now have 100K in the bank. Now, of course, you won't be needing to withdraw that amount of money, as, of course, everybody's going to be using digital yuan. But then the question is, if you don't convert it to digital yuan once it is nationalized, your $100,000 bill, or the stacks of it, they're essentially useless now. So it's either you give them and pretend like that $100,000 is actually there, or you physically no longer have $100,000. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like once they start that system, all the money suddenly becomes theirs. It's like, it's kaboom. It just goes away. You're left with useless paper, basically. And not only can they control the value of the exchange rate now, they can also stop you from exchanging to the US dollars or any other currency, because they know that those actual systems or the currency have values, and the digital yuan does not. So that's not all of it, right? What you're left essentially is a string of numbers that don't matter outside of China. Well, potentially you could go to some of the countries that decide to adopt that, maybe in Africa or some of the Latin American countries, but that's very limited. So what happens if you try to go on a vacation in America? We go to the bank, they're like, hey, I need to go to the US, I need to go visit New York or Los Angeles, and I need to get some US dollars, right? They're going to say that, well, for one, you can't leave the country, or for two, we can let you leave, but you can't really spend any of your money, because that's now digital. Anyways, so what they can do is basically say that in times of political crisis, turmoil, they can prevent anybody from doing bank runs. You can't go to the bank and ask to withdraw cash because they've simply stopped using it. But there's also other reasons. I'll just leave for time's sake, the main reasons. And now, of course, the second big factor is that political control. Now, when I said that the middle class and the lower class don't have enough wealth, that is true. But that doesn't mean the CCP can just let them rot freely, right? Guess what? The real revolutions don't come from a rich Chinese guy sitting in a yacht, on the Hudson River. It comes from the heavily suppressed Chinese people in China. So that system must be overarching, and it must be suppressive to the point that there's no way for you to fight back. Now, China last November saw students come out and protest in what was known as the white paper protest. And that was, of course, because during the draconian COVID lockdown, an apartment caught on fire in Xinjiang, and it killed many people. And this sparked outrage, right? People finally bursted. But imagine if you now have a digital economy. You can essentially curb any protest right away. People are just going to be denied access to their spending wallet, to their savings account, and to any type of loans that they have, or any type of mortgage they currently have. And you just deny them of the money, and they can't do anything about it. That's enough to kill 80 to 90% of the population's will to protest. Most people don't oppose such digitization either, right? In the US or in China, simply because their reasoning is they are law-abiding citizens and do not criticize the government, and they just want to survive and live. But this type of thinking also extends to the view of online data, right? TikTok has your data in China. But they say that, well, they're just regular people. They don't have state secrets. So therefore, it's okay that their data is being accessed by China via TikTok. Well, is this thinking correct? Absolutely not. If no one opposes the digitization of the yuan, it is imposed. And then by the time that you actually feel like something is wrong and you try to talk about it, you would be so restricted that when it actually happens to you, it's already too late. But of course, that's the nature right now. Most people in China do not know what it's like to be smashed by the iron fist of communism. They've either forgotten or have no knowledge or experience of what happened right during the 1950s, the 60s, to recall the horror or the experience. Simply, they just don't know about it. By the iron fist, I actually mean that the CCP persecutes certain groups, whether that's religious groups or dissidents or people who dare to speak out or young students. They arrest people for allegedly spying, anything that goes against the state. All these different groups, they've done something that the government didn't like, and the government has come down with a heavy hammer and just smacked them in the face. Some of them resisted, and some of them grew out of it, but most of them were oppressed and stayed suppressed by the regime. And so what we're talking about now is you essentially have moments where anybody in China could belong to a certain group in the next wave of political unrest. What happens to those people once the yuan system is digitized? When they remove the money factor, revolutions can't start without money. And so this is the CCP stabilization tactic as well. Now, most people are going to feel like, well, you're talking a very abstract idea, right? Everybody thinks that this system is just for, for the betterment of society. It's for people so that they can improve their workflow, improve how they deal with their finances. Of course, that's what they market it as, right? You can't tell people that our goal is to go Big Brother full 1984 on you and tell you that you no longer own your stuff. They're not going to say that. But imagine now, the reality is what you're doing once you submit to that system is all you're left with a single number, and is zeros and ones or 98765, whatever, right? But that string of number doesn't really matter to anything because it's not anything to begin with. And like in the movie, in Time, if you've ever watched it, everything is paid via that time counter on the wrist. So when you run out of time, you die. That's what's going to happen in China and potentially the rest of the world. But your sheer worth in life is no longer determined by the value that you actually physically provide, but it's by how much of that number do you really have. Isn't that scary? And that number is up to the CCP to determine or to decide. All right, that's it today on the episode of China digitizing its economy, specifically with the upcoming system of digital yuan or RMB. If you enjoy the content, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and comment below your thoughts on this topic. All right, as always, I'm David Zhang. This is China Insider. We'll see you next time.